Welcome, everybody. In Lesson 4.2, the essential question is how can you model decimal and whole number multiplication? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you two different ways to model decimal and whole number multiplication. The first way is going to be with our hundredths block here, and the second way I'm going to show you how to model the decimal and whole number multiplication is with our quick picks. So let's take a look at our first example here. In this first example, what we're multiplying here is we're multiplying 3 times 8 hundredths. And essentially what that means is if we're multiplying 3 times 8 hundredths, that means we're going to have 3 groups of 8 hundredths. So in order to figure out what 3 groups of 8 hundredths is with our hundredths blocks, is I'm going to model what 3 groups of 8 hundredths are in that hundredths grid. So what I did here in red is I shaded in 8 hundredths pieces. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shade in another group of 8 hundredths in a different color. So I have 2 hundredths there, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more hundredths that are filled in on my hundredths grid. So currently I have 2 groups of 8 hundredths, but I see I need to multiply 3 groups of 8 hundredths, so I need to have another group of 8 hundredths. Alright, and so what I'm going to do in order to represent that, I'm going to use green and I'm going to shade in 8 more hundredths on my hundredths grid. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now I have 3 groups of 8 hundredths. And as I could see on my hundredths grid, in total, when I have 3 groups of 8 hundredths, I have 2 full tenths that are filled in, and then I have 4 hundredths that are filled in. Therefore, I have a total of 24 hundredths on my hundredths grid. Therefore, 3 groups of 8 hundredths will end up equaling 24 hundredths. So what I'm going to do in this next example is I'm going to multiply 4 times 14 hundredths. So what that means is I need to have 4 groups of 14 hundredths. And I'm going to represent the 14 hundredths in my hundredths grid. I'm going to have 4 groups of those. So as you can see, what I've done here is I've shaded in a total of 14 hundredths in green. But that just gives me one group of 14 hundredths. I need to have 4 groups of those 14 hundredths. If I shade in the rest of this column, that's 6. I would need to shade in 8 more to have my second group of 14 hundredths. So in red, I now have another group of 14 hundredths shaded in, so that's 2 groups, and again I need a total of 4 groups of 14 hundredths. There is my third group of 14 hundredths in blue, and there is my fourth group of 14 hundredths shaded in purple. So as I could see, I have a total of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 hundredths there, which is also 5 tenths. And I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 additional hundredths. So in total, I have 56 hundredths in my hundredths grid filled in. So 4 times 14 hundredths is going to equal that 56 hundredths. So that's how we could use our hundredths box to multiply a whole number and a decimal. Now let's take a look at how we could do that with quick pictures. So in this example, 5 times 21 hundredths, what this means again is that we have 5 groups of 21 hundredths. And like we were doing in Chapter 3 when we were modeling our decimal numbers, we were using our sticks as the tenths pieces, and we were using our dots and circles as our hundredths pieces. So what we need to do is we need to show 5 groups of 21 hundredths. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make 2 tenths and 1 hundredths to represent 21 hundredths here. But that's just one group. In a different color, I'm going to make another group of 21 hundredths. Here's 2 tenths, and there's 1 hundredths. That's our second group. I'm going to make our third group that shows 21 hundredths, which are with our quick picks. I have our fourth group, which shows 21 hundredths. And now I have my fifth group, which shows 21 hundredths. So now that I have my 5 groups of 21 hundredths, what I need to first do is I need to first start combining my smallest place, which is the hundredths place. What I have is I have a total of 5 hundredths. Now, if I have 10 hundredths, I could create 1 tenth. I could regroup. But since I only have 5 hundredths, I'm going to move on and I'm going to see if I could regroup my tenths pieces. So now I move on to my tenths. If I count my total tenths, I could see I have a total of 10 tenths. And what we know from our previous lesson, if we have 10 tenths, we can take those 10 tenths away and we could regroup that and we can make one whole. So I'm going to take those 10 tenths away, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one whole square, because 10 tenths equals one whole. Now what I'm left with is I'm left with one whole, I'm left with 0 tenths, and I'm left with 5 hundredths. Therefore, 5 times 21 hundredths, 5 groups of 21 hundredths, equals 1 and 5 hundredths. Here's one last example using our quick picks. What we're doing is we're multiplying 4 times 46 hundredths. So what we need to do is we need to make 4 groups of 46 hundredths, which are with our quick picks. So I'm going to make one group of 46 hundredths because it has 4 tenths and it has 6 hundredths. And I'm going to make another group of 46 hundredths. And now you can see what I've created is I've created 4 groups of 46 hundredths. So like we did on the last problem, is we start by combining all of our hundredths and we see if we could regroup. Now remember, if we have 10 hundredths, we can regroup those hundredths and create 1 tenth. Well, if I have 6 hundredths here, 7, 8, 9, 10, I could create 1 new tenth. And what I have left is I have 14 hundredths blocks left. Well, if I have 14 hundredths blocks left, I could regroup and I could make another tenth. So I'm going to get rid of the 2 hundredths here, the 6 hundredths here, which is 8 hundredths, and I'm going to get rid of the 9, 10 hundredths, and I'm going to create another tenths piece. And what I'm left with is a total of 4 hundredths, and I can't regroup that. So now I've regrouped my hundredths, I can move on to all of my tenths here. And like we did before, as if we have 10 tenths, we could create one whole. I'm going to take these 4 tenths, which is 8 tenths, and then I'm going to get rid of these 2 tenths that are here. That equals a total of 10 tenths, and when I have eliminate those 10 tenths, I could make one whole square. And what I'm left with is I'm left with 4 tenths that are remaining. In addition to the 4 tenths that I have from this other group of 46 hundredths. Since I cannot regroup anymore, I see I have one whole square that's remaining. I have 8 full tenths that are remaining, and I have 4 hundredths that are remaining. Therefore, 46 hundredths times 4 is going to equal 1 and 84 hundredths. And that's how we use our quick picks to model whole number and decimal multiplication.